data that we look at to figure out what's going on with NFTs. I'm an investor, a venture capitalist. I focus on investing in the most promising entrepreneurs building things in crypto, and I have a deep specialty around NFTs. But as I told Ian, I'm not a religious-based investor. I'm an evidence-based one. And so I like to look at what does the data show us about what consumers are really doing here? What use cases of NFTs have product market fit? And what does that help us conclude about where things are going, what's working and what's not? There's a lot of hype in all new tech industries, but crypto is certainly not immune to it. And NFTs as well have sort of followed that kind of normal adoption path of tech. And we're probably in the trough of disillusionment after, sort of an incredible hype cycle for 2021 and some 2022. So let's take a look at where we are. First, just a reminder, what are NFTs? Well, they are property rights for intellectual property. We've been able to own or possess or trade physical goods for millennia, but we haven't been able to do that with digital goods because they weren't scarce. Anyone could make a copy of any piece of digital intellectual property, so I couldn't claim to own it. What that did in Web 2 is it created an access economy, where music went from being hard goods that you collected or owned, like cassettes and LPs and CDs, to streams. And the same thing happened with movies. We don't own VHS tapes or DVDs anymore, we just stream them on Netflix or wherever. Books also, we don't really own them as much. Some of us still treasure a few physical ones, but most of intellectual property has become a streaming access model. And that hasn't been terrible for business. It hasn't destroyed all businesses. Certainly changed the dynamic and the profitability for some. But what's exciting about NFTs is it's a general purpose technology that lets us change that and introduce, not necessarily to replace access models, but to add a new dimension to intellectual property where we can own it again. We can make intellectual property scarce. Is that a big deal? Yeah, because more than 10 million people spent $50 billion in the last 2 years to buy NFTs. This makes NFTs the most successful consumer product released since the smartphone. It's not an idle concept. I mean, it's an extraordinarily successful new idea that is certainly nowhere near its ripened stage. It's still hard to use. Typical of crypto, we picked one of the worst possible names to try to explain it or call it. It's not well branded. The concept around wallets is a terrible consumer experience. We're just nowhere near a mass market, general purpose UX around NFTs. And that's probably why only 10 million people or so played around with them. Those 10 million people have spent an unbelievable amount of money. And what did that lead to? Well, it led to a tipping point where even SNL did a send up on the concept. Jodee got it to be word of the year. It's sort of an extraordinary short amount of time for something to catch the zeitgeist. So if only 10 million people bought them, hundreds of millions of people around the world heard about them, which kind of primes us for what are we going to deliver to them. So let's dig in and see where we've been seeing activity. Okay, well, it's a broad set of use cases, but these are the 7 or 8 ChatGPT approved types of NFTs. Digital art, we saw, collectibles or profile picture type of NFTs, sports NFTs, metaverse and land, digital fashion and avatars. Some of these kind of cross over with each other. Music, and then maybe real world, where the NFT represents something you did in the real world or something you own in the real world, like a POAP, a proof of attendance. It doesn't have to be a physical attendance, it could have been a virtual event, but still, these are just some of the use cases. I think there'll be hundreds or thousands more. Fonts will be sold as NFT, musical scores, books and music, and movies. Kind of any piece of digital intellectual property can be defined as scarce and ownable. So we're just kind of getting started, but these are the ones where we've seen some evidence of activities. And I do believe that we sort of hit that tipping point where the mass media started to recognize it and talk about it, which got a lot of people curious. The irony was though, like, we weren't really ready for that. As I said, the UX kind of crappy, and I don't think enough brands and use cases were present to absorb that curiosity. I think we started artificially primed the pump, but that's okay, because we don't control this. This is what's so lovely about throwing technology out into the world is you get to see what sticks and where demand is. And as an evidence-based investor who started as a product manager, I don't presume to believe I can predict product market fit. I just try a lot of stuff and see what the market tells me. That's what all the best product managers do. In fact, most of the best products are made through iteration, right? Where we finally get something that sticks and then we iterate around what consumers are showing us or telling us. So we have a lot of iteration to do here, but let's just take a look at what people have responded to. So this here is the list of the top collections over all time. And so we see Axie Infinity, that was the first play-to-earn crypto game, where about $4.2 billion have been spent buying the NFTs associated with Axie. And the Bored Apes at $2.7 billion, and CryptoPunks and Mutant Apes and Art Blocks and the sports NFTs with NBA Top Shot, the Nike Clone X experiment. We'll talk about that in a minute. $845 million in sales. So this is just the top 15. The bottom there, number 15, Bored Ape kind of Club did $455 million in sales. So like these are not small numbers, but it is a small number of people. You can see that in the buyers column. And so what I would draw your attention to is if you sort of parse out what types of NFTs are on here, the largest number of buyers were attracted to the NFTs that had some gaming element associated with them. Now there's a flaw in my logic. Most of these profile picture collections only had 10,000 NFTs to begin with, so it's sort of hard to have more than 10,000 owners, except for the fact that they flip a lot. But sort of by design, they're limited in the wideness of their appeal. But most gaming NFTs are not. They try to enforce some type of scarcity around them within micro components of the collection, but they want everyone to be able to play. Certainly the NBA, which has 800 million fans worldwide, would like more than 10,000 of their customers to be able to own an NBA Top Shot. And indeed, that's what's happened. We have about 500,000 people who own NBA Top Shots. Still small, but it's interesting to me that if your goal is to try to achieve widespread adoption, you probably want to focus a little bit more on the NFTs that have some kind of gaming element to them, and obviously by definition have more than 10,000 that you can buy. Okay, one question we get asked a lot is, which blockchain should I build NFTs on? It's unfortunately a question that as a brand you have to think about. We want to reach a point in crypto where you don't have to think about this. Blockchains, sort of like operating systems, should be abstracted away from the consumer. And I think over some amount of time they will be, but right now they're not. And if a consumer has an Ethereum wallet but not a Polygon one, and you're selling on Polygon, well, they got to deal with that. So I'm sorry to tell you that that's not been solved yet, although we've invested in a lot of interoperability and abstracting technology that will come out over the next few years to hopefully make that stuff go away. But I just wanted to show you that while Ethereum has had $36 billion of sales of NFTs, Ronin, Solana, Flow, Polygon, they have meaningful amounts, but not nearly as close to Ethereum today. Still just an interesting piece for you. I think what that might mean is you probably can't go wrong if you're picking something in the top 5, but you still have a bunch of consumer UX work to do to make that experience pleasant and usable. Let's talk a little bit about other types of NFTs and how things have done. Well, the one that I'm most excited about is the one that Jodee mentioned, and that is NFTs that are dynamic. The first 1,000 or so NFT collections released don't really change over time. It's a static piece of digital intellectual property. Yes, it's true the NBA Top Shots and the NFL All Days, they're not static pieces, they're actually like micro videos, so they have a little movement in them, but still what I mean is, these are software, but they're not improving or altering themselves over time. And that to me feels like a huge missed opportunity. One argument against NFTs, we'll talk about this in a minute, the market today is maybe only 30 or 40,000 people who are flipping NFTs every day. They're essentially day trading or professional NFT traders. That's kind of where we are in the market cycle. Definitely at a trough. We're up about 40% in the month of January, but still, it's not nearly the 1.5 million people that were most active in Q1 2022. But one reason why, or maybe one defense we could adopt to discourage just the flipping of NFTs is NFTs that reward you the longer you hold them, which is an obvious improvement by some, but maybe we go further than that, NFTs that take on the properties of the owner or the activities or things that the owner does to become more rare or more interesting over time. And so this is an example that the Bored Apes did, and this dynamic NFT drop has done $561 million of sales in the first 24 hours. And the idea is that the land itself will change or improve over time as you own it. I don't know that this particular implementation is the one that's going to crack the nut, but I would expect to see more dynamic NFTs that have properties that evolve over time. One example of a traditional mainstream brand that's done quite well here, of course, is Nike. You know that they purchased Artifact and then launched this unbelievable collection called Clone X, which was a collab, which is sort of the state of the sneaker market and the street apparel market anyway, lots of collabs. They launched 20,000 units, so not 10,000, and they did $845 million of sales thus far. Now the criticism you might make here is these are people buying them because they expect they're going to increase in value and they're going to sell them for profit. That's a feature, not a bug, but it's not the only reason you want people to be buying your NFTs. And I say that this draws heavily from the Supreme and Nike models already, where those are most high-end sneaker and most high-end street apparel are scarcity models. Supreme kind of invented and popularized it, where there's a limited number of $150 sweatshirts at the drop that are worth $800 the minute you've been lucky enough to stand in line and get the drop. And many have noted that in that model, 90% of the economic value of the Supreme ecosystem is not captured by Supreme. It's all in the aftermarket. But at least with NFTs, the creator gets a royalty for all of the aftermarket. So you participate in some extent to this, which is, I think, an improvement over the model. But here we have a wonderful example of sort of the combination of art and apparel, where wearables can be customized, and there's a physical collection tie-in. So if you have the NFT, there are physical goods that will be sent to you, or you can register for and receive. Phygital, I think, is the expression used to describe these NFTs that have a physical and digital link to them. I think I've got one more slide on that in a second, but Nike's done extraordinarily well here, I think, capitalizing on not just their brand equity, but their kind of willingness to understand what the culture is around NFTs and kind of embrace it, rather than just release some NFT of a digital shoe. Here's a kind of deep dive into how well they've done with it. The blue bars that you see are all essentially Nike sales in the digital fashion subsector of NFTs. And the other colors are other folks like Gucci or Adidas who have entered, but you can see that Nike's completely dominated it. And yes, you'll point out that, yeah, but it's nothing right now. Yeah, but right now, I have high conviction that we're just in a market malaise, and that there will be new experiments and new use cases that will attract normies, and as we improve the UX, and some number of months or years from now, we'll be saying, this is extraordinarily interesting again. Now, this has to stop us from investing, by the way, in this area. We think now is absolutely the time to be investing in the products that will be released over the year or two. But what gives us the conviction that that's true? And it's largely the fact that this is a product type that has so many real-world analogies. 40% of all humans over the history of humanity have collected things, from art to shoes to recipes to baseball cards. People collect. Not everyone, but most people do. And so at its root, just the collectible use case of NFTs, we think, will produce and resonate massively with digital natives, who of course will collect digital goods because they spend the rest of their lives on digital devices. But the phygital space is also interesting for those of us who maybe want a physical representation of the things that we're collecting. And this is Artifact. They've done about 70% of all phygital secondary volume. So again, it's the Nike example. But you can see real consistent sort of drop behavior at the time of the release, and then some tail of activity afterwards. This is just secondary trading volume though, so it doesn't include the primary, but that was the 845 million is total primary and secondary sales for CloneX. But here I think impressive that this is a product that continues to have legs. And the thing that should surprise many of us the most is while there's a small number of people who have traded NFTs, look at the ARPUs. So this is just the last 12 months of NFT sales divided by the number of people who purchased, and we're seeing $3,000 to $4,000 of ARPU. Now, this is one of the most extraordinary spend levels for consumer products, right? Netflix is $180 a year, Spotify's like $60 a year. I don't know what Apple's ARPU is across all physical and services that they sell, probably higher than both of those, but still, you know, anything north of $100 a year is like incredible consumer experience. So to get people to spend, I've seen this number change, I monitor it very closely. The lowest I've ever seen it is $960. So that was sort of during the mass market craze around NFT. So what is that telling us? That consumers, at least a small number, 1.5 million monthlies at its peak, 10 million total, are willing to spend $1,000 or more a year on this product category is an area I want to invest in, right? When you see ARPUs that high. One thing I'm just about done here, Jodee, but one thing I wanted to address is we hear a lot of complaints about the fact that marketplaces that sell NFTs incent users to trade through the promise of a future reward, usually called an airdrop. And when that happens, we see an artificial amount of activity happen on marketplaces. And we can, because blockchains are transparent, we can go back and look and diagnose how much of that activity was authentic versus wash trading, where it's one person selling to another. And the answer is a whole lot of it was during the big craze. So I think we might have artificially inflated our view of what NFTs were during that Q1 of 2022, where our best guess is maybe as much as half the volume was wash trading. But the last thing I'll tell you is I think NFTs are just at the beginning phase. We got ahead of ourselves, but I have a high conviction that over the next 10 years, this will be one of the largest consumer industries in the trillions of dollars, and will completely rewrite the rules of intellectual property. So thanks for listening to me today.
That was amazing.